The oil market collapse explained. And here we are again with breaking down another crisis. I mean, it literally seems like Thanos has arrived on Earth and has snapped his fingers because there is just constant crisis after crisis. I mean, with the coronavirus, with economies collapsing, businesses closing, and now with oil prices crashing into the negative territory, it is very easy to get overwhelmed and even depressed with what's going on right now. But in my opinion, it's just a matter of perspective on these things. These types of things are not in our control, and we can look at these in either one of two ways. Option one is to look at all this shit going on and think the world is ending and just lose the will to live. Or we have option two, is where we look at all these events and see nothing but opportunity. Because in reality, every single crisis provides opportunities. It just may be hard to identify and find them with all the darkness that's in the world right now. Now, before I break down what is going on with oil and how you can potentially capitalize on the opportunity, I just want to say, with everything going on, it really does put life into perspective. These are very hard times right now, possibly the hardest time some of us have ever had to live through next to war. But my message to everyone is, we have to stay strong. Us human beings have been through way worse times than what we are currently going through now. And I'm sure it will take a lot more than this to break our spirits. The best thing that we can do is concentrate on coming out of all these events a lot more wiser, stronger, and more grateful for the lives we have. And now that my little motivational speech is all done, let's get straight into the video explaining what the hell is going on with oil right now. Now, the easiest thing for me to start off with and help us all get a perspective on this situation by breaking down what oil actually is and what it's actually used for. Now, all oil or crude oil simply is just a raw natural resource that is extracted from the earth. And it's refined into different products such as petrol, jet fuel and other petroleum products. I'm sure many of us recall touching on this in chemistry at school. Now, many economists agree that crude oil was, and remains to this day, the single most important commodity in the world, as it is our primary source of energy production. And because we are heavily reliant on the production and supply of oil for our daily lives, for things such as transport, it is a global commodity that trades in markets around the world. And alongside using oil for transportation, we also heavily rely on it to power and heat our buildings and our homes. So if you didn't know already, we can see why oil is a pretty important commodity and substance. Now, oil is known as being a non-renewable source, meaning there is only a certain amount of oil in the world, and one day there won't be any more oil left. And because of this finite amount in the world, oil itself is heavily influenced by the laws of supply and demand. When there is a massive demand for a product and the supply is low, this typically will cause the price of a commodity to rise. And when there is a massive supply of a product and the demand is low, this will typically cause the price of a commodity to fall. This is similar to what happens in the diamond market. Believe it or not, diamonds themselves are not actually rare, no matter what your jeweler says. But the reason why diamonds are so expensive is because the price is artificially created by keeping the supply of diamonds low in comparison to the demand. That's why the diamond industry only mines a certain amount of diamonds each year, to keep the supply low and to keep the price as high as possible. Now, when the world is operating as normal, the demand for oil is huge because of the way we live our lives in today's society. I mean, we go out and drive our cars, we go to restaurants, we catch flights, we like to keep all our buildings warm, and because of all this, we need oil. There is a huge demand for it. And because of this massive worldwide demand for it, you can make a lot of money from selling it. But that's only if you have oil and you have the ability to produce it. Now, the three biggest producers of oil in the world as of 2020 are the United States, Saudi Arabia and Russia. And because they are the biggest producers of oil in the world, these countries typically want the price of oil to be as high as possible. so they can make more money from selling it to countries who need it, as some countries are unable to produce enough oil themselves in order to meet the demand to power their country. And that's how it simply goes, and that's basically how the oil system really simplifies down to. Now that we've covered the history and use of it, let's talk about the price of oil. Because when it comes to the price of oil, there are mainly two main macro factors that affect the price of oil. Number one being the actual demand for the commodity, and two is market manipulation of the price. Now, usually the demand for oil and price stays relatively consistent and all is usually good. But as soon as the coronavirus outbreak hit the world, this all went to the shit. As we all know, the coronavirus has affected the whole world on an international level, and we have seen some of the biggest countries and some of the biggest consumers of oil in the world to go into a full-scale lockdown. Now, because of the whole world going into a lockdown, millions of cars that usually will be driving on the roads are now sitting in people's driveways. Thousands of planes that are usually flying high in the air are sitting in airport hangars gathering dust. And massive office buildings that are usually powered to accommodate thousands of workers are no longer in use. And because of this huge change in the way we are currently living our lives right now, the demand for oil has plummeted to levels where certain countries haven't seen for over 30 years. And because of the demand plummeting, this is what causes the price of oil to also plummet. And that's reason number one why the price of oil has crashed. It simply is because the worldwide demand of oil itself has fallen. Nothing fancy at all. But remember, that is only one of the big macro factors that affect the price of oil. Another huge factor is market manipulation. This is where it starts to get very, very interesting. In March of 2020, the biggest oil producers in the world, so the US, Saudi Arabia and Russia, came together and tried to do something to stabilize and compensate for the falling worldwide demand of oil due to the coronavirus outbreak. The goal of the meeting was to try and keep the price of oil at a consistent level, as again, they want to see prices of oil as high and consistent as possible, as they are the global leaders of oil production and they make a lot of money from it. What was suggested was for all countries to reduce the levels of oil production in order to keep the price of oil at a moderate level. Because if the demand of a product is falling, then it makes sense to decrease the supply to ensure the price stays consistent, similar to what we said about the diamond market earlier. Now, for reasons unbeknown to us and too complicated for me to explain, Russia stormed out of that meeting and refused to reduce their levels of oil production, and even decided to increase their levels of oil production. Cheeky bastards. This caused for Saudi Arabia to get pissed off with Russia, and they decided to increase their levels of oil production, which then initiated an oil war between the two countries. And it literally came down to a competition of who has the biggest balls. And the size of these guys' balls were measured by the levels of oil production. Yeah, I know, it literally sounds like some child playground antics. So instead of decreasing the supply of oil, which was the whole goal of the meeting, Saudi Arabia and Russia, two of the biggest oil producers in the world, both increased the production of oil, doing the complete opposite of what was initially proposed. And with the supply increasing and the demand decreasing, this is literally like adding fuel to an already massive fire, which then basically caused the free fall and crash of the price of oil. Picture Russia and Saudi Arabia like two planes dive bombing straight to the ground and both staring at each other to see who chickens out first. And with this battle of the balls match combined with the crashing demand, this is what led to the price of oil to crash into ground zero, and even into the negative territory as of 20th of April for the first time ever in history. Now, the reason why the price of oil went negative is because oil companies typically put their oil into barrels and they store it away until they need it. Now, this storing of oil itself costs companies money, and because the demand is so low and the supply is so high, oil companies are essentially sitting on barrels and barrels of oil that they can't sell. They literally don't have any more room to store any more barrels of oil. I mean, they can't even sell the oil barrels that they've already got, so why the hell would they want more? Which basically led to oil companies essentially paying people to take the oil away from them, as they just wanted to get rid of it. It's like having your house full of water. Your house is full of water and you can't get rid of it anytime soon. And all of a sudden, imagine 10 trucks turn up with tons and tons of more water. If your house is already full, then you can't add more water into your house. And once the oil price hit negative rates, this basically meant that oil companies were selling oil at a huge loss. Imagine building a TV for $100 but having to sell it for $30. It hardly is a sustainable business model, and it's only a matter of time that that company will go bust. Now, low oil prices are not bad for you and me, and for countries that buy and import oil, as countries can purchase this cheap oil for pennies on the dollar, and it will cost people like you and me less to fill up our cars with petrol. But for people like oil companies and people working for these companies, they are not happy at all, because they're not making any money. They're pumping oil from the ground and selling it for pennies on the dollar to a very small crowd. So imagine an oil company is selling a barrel of oil for $50 to a group of 1,000 people consistently. But as demand falls and the price per barrel decreases, then they have to start selling one barrel for $30 to 500 people. And as again, the demand falls and the prices per barrel decreases, they then have to sell a barrel for $20 to 200 people, and then $5 to 10 people. Then once the price of oil went negative, the oil companies had to sell the barrels at a loss because it's no longer profitable for them to sell it. And you can see how this works, and this is what's leading and going to lead many oil companies to bankruptcy. Now, on the 12th of April 2020, the US, Saudi Arabia and Russia finally came together again and all agreed to finally reduce their levels of oil production. However, the agreement stated that the reduction will start only in May of 2020 and not immediately. So this oil war and excess supply of oil is still being produced. As such, it's still continuing to hammer the price of oil, which again will lead us to see oil companies continue to struggle badly until the production decreases in May. But even then, with all the uncertainty in the world, it's very hard to predict what will exactly happen. Because even though all the countries agreed to reduce the production of oil, there is still a massive surplus of it as a consequence of the war between the two countries. And because negative oil prices have never happened before, we are not sure what the exact consequences of it will be. Now, if we switch sides and look back at the demand side of things, it doesn't look like the world is going back to being normal anytime soon. We're not going to be seeing the usual levels of oil consumption anytime soon. Now, I know you may be thinking, Aaron, that's all great, but what the hell has this got to do with me? And I'm going to tell you, like I said before, oil is considered to be one of the most important, if not the most important commodity in the world, and oil companies make up massive parts of a country's stock market. And if oil companies collapse, then that means countries' stock markets will collapse, which will then lead to an even worse economic crisis, which pretty much the world is already in. So it will essentially be ourselves digging a deeper grave. So this leads to the question of, will governments have to step in and provide assistance to these companies to stop them from going bankrupt? So this leads to the question of, will governments have to step in and provide assistance to these companies to stop them from going bankrupt? As well as the already massive stimulus packages and huge printing of money that we've already been seeing implemented. And like I've covered in my previous videos, these types of things lead to money drying up, businesses closing down, and employment rates shooting up. Now, I hardly doubt President Trump or Putin is watching this video. And if he is, I'm sorry I called your country cheeky bastards. But anyway, I know I started off this video by saying how we can find the opportunity in all this chaos. but I needed to explain the reasons why it has all happened, as now it makes it so much more easier for you and me to understand the opportunities that have presented themselves. Even though the world is heading towards more renewable sources of energy, such as solar, wind, and cleaner forms of energy such as electricity to power our world, we are still going to be heavily reliant on oil. Now, the biggest question that I got was, Aaron, do negative oil prices mean I'll literally get paid to buy oil? The unfortunate answer is no. Negative oil prices do not mean you're getting paid to buy oil. What it means is that oil companies are selling oil at a loss. That's what it means by a negative price. So if you did expect to get paid a tenner to put petrol in your car, I'm sorry mate, that's not going to happen. But there are three main ways that you can capitalize on what's going on right now. The first way is to just simply buy and hold oil. Because as I said, even though the world is moving towards cleaner forms of energy, we still as a society are heavily reliant on oil. And once lockdowns etc are all over and we start using the world properly again, the price will rocket back up as it will with demand. The second way to potentially capitalize on this crisis is to invest or trade oil company stocks. Because of the collapse of the price of oil, oil companies typically will have much lower profits right now, and I know some are making huge losses, meaning that the stock price of some companies will go down. And you can take that opportunity to buy some oil company stocks for pennies on the dollar. But what you want to make sure is that company you're investing in has enough cash reserve to ride the wave out. And you can simply do this by looking on company's balance sheet and company cash flow records, which all should be public record. Otherwise, if they don't have enough cash at hand to ride all this turmoil out, then they will end up going bankrupt. And the only thing you'll be owning then is just a dead horse. Or the final option is you can purchase an energy and oil index fund, which all essentially is just a collection of oil and energy companies, rather than relying on solely one company, which obviously exposes you to less risk. But remember, with less risk typically comes less reward. Now, before I wrap up this video and leave you to it, just to make this clear, this is not financial advice and all investments carry a degree of risk. So you need to make sure you do your proper due diligence and research before you part ways with any money. And even if you're not thinking and don't have any money to invest in, this whole scenario itself is still a pretty interesting concept as a whole, to see how everything and everyone in the world is connected and linked together, and also to view more consequences of the coronavirus outbreak. And if you would like more videos like this, then make sure you leave a comment below. And if you are new to the channel, welcome to the channel, and to all our loyal subscribers, we are glad you are here. We aim to produce at least one high quality animated video per week, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any golden knowledge. I'll see you soon.